I mean, a lot of the kind of things that you talk about with the talk with the biases and social pressure and what have you, it all seems to me like an extension of, frankly, just confirmation bias. You just kind of want it to be whatever you think it should be. But the social pressure
Yeah,
side is trying to make everybody else think it should be that too, which is not healthy for science as a whole.
it's really not. It's really not. This is one of the points that Gambrill makes in her scholarship on propaganda, is that one of the hallmarks of a flawed scientific literature is the censorship stuff. Because you wouldn't need to censor something if it's just wrong. You would just reveal it to be wrong and you move along. It's when you prohibit something, why would you do that unless you're afraid it might be right?
Yeah, definitely. And it was just coming up to the concluding remarks in your talk. It's just like a lot of these things. And as a proper scientist, you have your limitations to everything in here, which is great.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. I have to admit, my favorite of these is the old wine. So let me explain that. So my point in identifying this is that my entire talk could be viewed as nothing but my contribution to organized skepticism.
Mhm.
Organized skepticism is supposed to be one of the norms of science. Merton in the 1940s argued, was kind of trying to lay out, well, why does science deserve a special place in societies like credibility pecking order? Why should we believe science more than we believe clergy or politicians, or high school teacher, or why does it deserve this? And one of the reasons, well, his main reasons were these norms of science. One of them is organized skepticism. Organized skepticism is not just one person acting like a skeptic. It's that the community of scholars, when it's faced with some new data, new discovery, they really hammer at it to see if they can destroy it, to see if it's really true, to see if it's not true, to figure out if there are alternative explanations that are more true. And in some ways, everything I did in this talk and really in our conversation, there's nothing. Maybe it sounds new, but it's not really new. This is really what organized skepticism is supposed to be like.
Oh yeah. And it should be, but this is where I come back to my concerns over. It's like one of the reasons for me doing this channel and pushing as hard as I do is that I do get concerned about the future of science, and that a lot of these kinds of things are not taught to my generation and younger. It's like I said to Anna, a lot of the things like what the normative principles of science are didn't learn until 5 years after getting my PhD. So
Right,
it's
right,
kind of
yes.
I was like, what the hell? Why didn't I learn this in grad school? Um, why wasn't there
Well,
any requirement I was supposed to take? Um,
first place, nobody learns the principles of science in high school, as far as I know. Maybe somebody does, but
I
most
don't
people
know
don't.
that either, and I've
Yeah,
asked folks in
you
K
learn the facts. You learn, you learn, right, the chemical compounds and reactions, and you learn some of the principles of things, but you don't learn how anyone discovered any of that. You don't learn how people figured that stuff out. You didn't learn how to cope with uncertainty to reach logically tractable conclusions. Almost nobody does that. So my daughter, my adult daughter, who has two kids, is homeschooling them.
mm,
And homeschooling them. Now, homeschooling is not what most people think. It's not like, they sit in their house for 6 hours a day, like doing, workbooks. They go out into the world. There are classes
yeah,
she's in art classes. She goes to forest school where they go out. The forest school is amazing because they integrate math and science and creativity into being out into the outdoors. It's completely amazing. And so my granddaughter is 7, and she discovered some weird looking rock while wandering around in some local stream. And she is now basically doing some combination of archaeology and anthropology trying to figure out what made this rock.
sweet.
That is science. It's at least proto science. And you want forest school? What kind of public school does forest school? Has kids wandering, getting themselves wet and muddy in streams. So, yeah, the difference between those two is stark. So,
Oh yeah, there's dramatic difference, and I mean, but the so many do go to public school and a private school and what have you that even not getting that kind of proto science, there has to be something else that fills the void. And it's just like some of the activism side of it has been like, I don't know if you remember the Smithsonian piece where they assumed the aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture and what have you,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
scientific
yeah.
scientific liter scientific thinking, rational thinking, logical thinking is
With
all looped in
whiteness,
there as being
right,
that, and that's just a way to denigrate everything.
and right, yeah,
But that's
yeah. I
that's
mean,
my concern is, like, what my generation and younger in students are being taught is, well, science isn't all that great because it's just this thing that's been, you know,
right,
created by
legitimates white
created by old
supremacy
white
or something.
guys.
Right. Yeah, which is just so completely. I mean, it's not. Almost all of these things. Okay, so let's retreat way up. The most bizarre conspiracy theories usually have grains of truth under them.
Mm.
So, like the most bizarre current conspiracy to me is QAnon, right? That there's like powerful pedophiles are sitting around, trying to rule the world. This is like completely batshit stuff. And yet, there are powerful pedophiles who have done some terrible things. There's Epstein is obvious. The Catholic priests are another example. So okay. So if you have a really bizarre conspiracy theory and you can admit that there are grains of truth under it, even though the whole thing is completely batshit nuts, that's how I see this sort of like science is white supremacy stuff. That it's basically batshit nuts, but there are grains of truth on it, right? There have been times when science has been used for terrible purposes
Oh,
and
yeah.
to legitimate, social hierarchies. That's not completely false. It's useful to know about that. So
It's not, yeah,
you
it's
don't,
not
you don't throw the
completely
whole thing out because of that.
yeah, you don't throw the whole thing out. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater just because, I mean, there's shit floating around the bathwater. But
Yeah, you kind of flush the shit down, you clean it up, and you take a bath. That's what you do, right?
that's a
Exactly.
euphemism I never thought I'd say. Did you like that video? Are you curious about the rest of the video? Because that clip came from an episode of SciChat Saturday, and the full episode is linked in the description. As always, stay curious.